Hello Vegan Cooking Odyssey class, this is Derek again. Today we're making our only dessert for the course. We're going to be making a raw citrus cheesecake. It's from one of my favorite cookbooks, Food 52 Vegan by Gena Hamshaw. A really good starter cookbook that I definitely recommend. This is on page 125 in the desserts section. I made this once before for a bunch of my coworkers, and vegans and non-vegans alike ate it up, so I was very thrilled with how it came out, and I definitely am excited to make it again. So there's a few elements of this recipe that I think are important to note. It's raw, which means that there is no cooking involved, there's nothing needed on the stove or in the oven. We're just going to need a few other appliances to help it come together, including a food processor to make the filling, to make the crust. We're going to need a blender to make the filling. We're going to need a nice pan to let the cheesecake come together in. It's best if you have a springform pan like this, because that will definitely help you get that perfect cheesecake edge, that rounded edge. If you don't, you can try to make it work in other molds, but you won't quite have that same nice edge, and it could be a pain removing the cake later. So springform pan is definitely best. I think that's about 9 inches in diameter. The other thing I think you need that's the only thing that may be a little specialty is a zester, and I have this nice microplane right here. But any zester you have is fine. Now, as for the elements of vegan baking that we're going to be using in this recipe, the number one thing to note is that this is a cheesecake without cheese. And to replicate the cheese, we're going to be using raw, unsalted cashews. Completely unsalted, unroasted. They do taste great as a snacking item, but in vegan cooking they're very helpful because once they're soaked and then blended down, they can resemble a cream cheese, basically. And depending on how much liquid you use, it can be closer to a milk or closer to a harder cheese. The other things we'll need include coconut oil, which will be really helpful in getting some fat content, as well as some sugar, I think, too, and it will help in emulsifying things and binding them together, like an egg would in normal dairy cooking. Also to that end, we're going to be using agave nectar, which is similar to maple syrup. It has a bit more neutral of a flavor, perfect for baking and a lot of other dressings and various savory recipes. But this is going to add a lot of sweetness as well as stickiness to bind things together. We're going to need some vanilla extract just to add some extra flavor. We're going to need some salt. For the crust, we're going to use almonds. You can also use walnuts if that's all you have. These are just raw, again. And we're also going to use pitted medjool dates, which you can get, are becoming more and more easy to find. You can get them at Stop and Shop. I got these at Atlantic Spice in North Truro. They're very tasty. Do make sure that you buy them pitted so that they don't have that hard pit, because especially in this recipe we're going to be grinding these down. We don't want any pits to ruin the texture. And finally, what we're really going to highlight flavor-wise are citrus. And for this we're going to need orange and lemon. It's probably going to be about 1 lemon and 1 to 2 oranges for this recipe. We're going to need a 1/4 cup of the juice, and we're going to need a teaspoon of the zest of the orange. So however many oranges you need to get a 1/4 cup of juice. And then for the lemon, we're going to need 2 tablespoons of juice, and then I think just a teaspoon of the zest as well. So we're going to get full flavor out of both of those, and they're going to combine with the rest of the ingredients really nicely. So let's begin. So the first step of the recipe begins ideally 3 hours before you're truly ready to put everything together. And that's soaking the cashews. So I have right here, this is, how much? 3 cups of cashews, about 390 grams. If you can use weight measurement or mass measurement, that is definitely better than using cups, because it's much more precise to measure the mass. So this is 390 grams of raw cashews that have been soaking for about 3 hours. And you can see that they've started to expand a little bit, they're getting a little bit more porous, and then when we blend them, they will disintegrate really nicely. So that's the first step. A few other things to get ready before we start is to measure out about 2/3 of a cup of this coconut oil. For this recipe, you can use refined or unrefined. The refined is going to have a little bit less of that coconut flavor. So if you're cooking savory, you probably do want the refined, but if you're baking, you can probably use either because the coconut flavor is welcome. You want to measure out about 2/3 of a cup and then microwave it in a small glass bowl or measuring cup so that it becomes totally liquid like this. And you can see this is about 2/3 of a cup. You only need to microwave for about 30 seconds to 45 seconds. Other than that, I've measured out just about everything I need for the crust, so we will start with that. We're going to make the crust first, and for that we're going to need the food processor just with a normal blade in. There's only 3 ingredients in the crust. It's very simple. We're going to start with these raw almonds. These are also slivered, but it's okay if you don't have them slivered because obviously they're just going to grind down. And again, this is about 1.5 cups of almonds, but for precision's sake, it's 210 grams. And you can use walnuts here. You can use walnuts here as well, but you'll need to measure slightly differently. So those go right in. And we're also just going to add a pinch of salt for now. Okay. So we're just going to pulse this very quickly until it's become like an almond meal. We want to just get this down to coarse granules first. And I think that, yeah, so there we go. That's been coarsely ground, and now we will add our pitted dates. This could put a little bit of a strain on your food processor, so ideally you have one with some decent power to it, because these dates are very sticky and will take some time to grind down. And this was a 1 2/3 of a cup of pitted medjool dates, 410 grams, just under a pound. There we go. Okay. Okay, we'll check on it. You can see actually this has worked very well. The dates are already about the same as the almonds in terms of size. I'll just go a little bit longer. Okay, and depending on your food processor, you might need to scrape down the sides, but this one I think has done a great job. Yeah, so I think we're in good shape. Now we're going to just quickly remove the cover and safely remove this blade. And we're going to use a spatula to press this into the base of our springform pan. So we'll just pour it out, and then it's so sticky that it should just adhere right away once you press down a little. Definitely try to press down so you get that nice flat surface. Okay, that's looking good. So now we're going to swap out our food processor for our blender, and we will make the filling. Okay, so before we make our filling, we have one final thing to do, or I guess 2 final things to do. We need to zest and juice our citrus. So if you haven't done it before, you can just definitely make sure to zest first before you juice. Much easier this way. I'm going to, yeah, I guess I will put this on and I'll measure. We're going to be measuring a teaspoon of each kind of zest. So I'll start with the orange. And I'm just going to go up and down. If you have a microplane, try to use the whole length of the blades. And then just kind of moving around whenever you can. This is just like a navel orange too. I don't think it's super important what type you use. If you use a blood orange, you might get a somewhat different flavor, so I might try not to use one of those, but Valencia or navel, anything like that I think is fine. And probably this recipe would also work with other kinds of citrus, though I haven't tried it. I'll also check for stickers before you do this. These don't have any, luckily. And you know, if you do a little bit more or a little bit less, it's probably totally fine, but this will definitely make sure the flavor comes through. So that is about a teaspoon of the orange zest, and I'm also just going to keep going with the same one and add our lemon zest. Which this is a very large lemon, so I think I'll get what I need from it, but you might need 2 lemons for this. Try not to use anything too small, by the way, because that can obviously get your fingers in danger. The larger, the better. Okay, so I finished zesting. I have about a teaspoon of each. It's probably just important that you have 2 teaspoons total of zest. And then I'm also just going to get our orange and lemon juice. So I'm going to just do a nice cut down the center for each. Okay. And if you have a nice juicer like this, that's great. Otherwise, you can also juice it however you can and just make sure there's no seeds in the final result. So I'll do this lemon. The lemon we're going to need 2 tablespoons, which is usually about 1 lemon. Oop. Spraying a little. Okay, and then I'm just going to squeeze the oranges. We're going to need a 1/4 cup of the orange juice, which is 4 tablespoons. I'm going to squeeze that into this measuring cup. If you have an orange juicer, feel free to use that. Great. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to begin the filling in the blender. First thing is to drain your soaked cashews. We don't want any of that extra water in the filling. Okay. We'll give it a quick little shake. And then this goes right in the blender the best you can. Okay. And now we're just going to add the remainder of the ingredients to this blender. That's the 2/3 of a cup of the melted coconut oil. Again, you can use refined or unrefined in this recipe. This is refined that we're using today. Okay. We're going to add the agave nectar, 1/2 cup, which is going to add quite a bit of sweetness. And it might take a little while to drip. Okay. We're going to add all of our zest, orange and lemon. Carefully, I'll take that off. And you might need a little spoon or something to scrape it off your microplane or your zester. Great. I'll add the 1/4 cup of orange juice. Definitely freshly squeezed if you can, because the stuff you get at the supermarket already has tons of sugar in it. And then we're going to do 2 tablespoons of the lemon juice, which is probably close to what I have here. I might have a little bit more. And a little bit more is probably totally fine in this recipe. Finally, we're going to add 2 last things. So she actually says if you have vanilla beans, to scrape the seeds from 1 vanilla bean. But for most of us, we're not going to have vanilla beans readily on hand. We'll just have vanilla extract, and we'll use 2 teaspoons. Okay. And the last thing to add to our blender is a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Salt is very important in desserts, even though sometimes it's just there to be sort of invisible. Okay, and now we'll add our cover on to our blender. And we're just going to blend this until smooth, I guess on a liquefier puree setting. And every now and then you might have to scrape down the sides. Make sure it's really, really smooth and there aren't any cashew bits remaining. Okay, so let's give it a shot. Okay, so our filling is looking very smooth now. We stopped for a moment. My mom, who's on camera right now, scraped it down and is now looking really smooth. You can take a look, and ideally it also smells quite nice. Yes, it does. And then this is just going to go right into our springform pan on top of that crust. You're going to want to scrape it out with your spatula. There's a lot of it hiding back here. Okay. Let's see how this looks when we smooth it out. We're going to smooth it all around, trying to get it as flat on top as possible, but of course it won't be perfect. But certainly you want to get to the edges. You can garnish this if you'd like with some lemon zest or like lemon strips that you've peeled off, but I'm totally happy without. Okay, and I think this is looking good. So that is really basically it. We will just put some wrap on it real quick, we'll cover it, and then in about 2 hours it'll be ready to eat. It's been a little over 2 hours since we put the cheesecake into the fridge, and it should be all ready to eat. Okay. Looks good. And now we can make the most of our springform pan. Let's gently take it off. Might have to go around the rim to release it. Yeah, it's a little stuck. Okay. All right, there it is. There we have it. So that's the raw citrus cheesecake with cashews and an almond date crust.